Hey there! Welcome back to Info 3370, studying social inequality with data science. I've got the data wrangling cheat sheet open from RStudio, and we're about to cover how to summarize data. When we summarize data, we take a big data frame with many rows, and we summarize that into a data frame with one or perhaps a few rows if we've used group by before summarize. So let's see how this works in our example. In a previous video, we created a mutated data frame, which has each row represents a person, and there are a few key variables. So we have the year that person responded to the survey, that person's education value, and also the income from wage and salary that they reported for the year. And we see that this is a really huge data frame. There are roughly 1.3 million observations. And our task here is that within subgroups defined by education and year, we want to summarize these observations on lots of people to a few summary statistics: the 10th percentile, the 50th percentile, and the 90th percentile of the earnings distribution. So let's see how to do that. So we want to start with our mutated data frame. And I should say we want to store the output of this result in a new object called summarized. Okay, so I'm going to start with the mutated data frame. And I first want to show how you would do this without looking at the particular subgroups, but just over all the observations. So we might take mutated and pass that data frame into a call to the summarize function. So summarize lets us define a new variable, so like P50. And this is going to be the median income among all the people in the data set. We can calculate that median with the quantile function. So recall that quantile takes a vector of values, in this case the observed inc wage, and if we want to be good, we can call that with x. And here I'm going to pull up the documentation for quantile and see that the next argument is probs. So that tells us what probability we want to create a quantile summary for. So 0.5. So what is this call going to do? It's going to start with the mutated object, and it's going to summarize that data frame by creating a new variable P50. And stored in that variable P50 is going to be the 0.5 quantile of the inc wage variable. So let's go ahead and run this, and then let's look at what it produces. So when we look at summarized, we now have a data frame with one variable and one observation. So here it took all this data, 1.3 million observations on 7 variables, and it looked only at the inc wage column, and it returned the median value of the inc wage variable. So summarize has syntax very similar to mutate, where you first define the new variable you're creating, and then the function of the existing variables that produces that new variable. The way that it's different from mutate is that it takes many rows and returns a single row as the summary. Also similar to mutate, you can create multiple summarize calls in one, create multiple new variables in one call to summarize. So let's also make a P90 variable, which is going to have the 90th percentile of inc wage. So quantile x equals inc wage, probs equals 0.9. And up here we could also do this for the 10th percentile. X equals inc wage, probs equals 0.1. And so similar to mutate, we're now defining 3 new variables, and those variables are going to be summaries of the mutated data. So if we look at this, we now have these 3 summaries. Okay, but we did not set out to summarize all the incomes in the data. We wanted to look within subgroups defined by education and year and make summaries within those subgroups. So we can do this with the group by function. So group by is going to tell the tidyverse that everything that comes after the group by should be carried out within groups defined by the variables we include in this command. So here we're going to group by education and year. And if I run just this part of the code, we can see that our tible's modified. So now at the top it tells us that we have these groups, education and year. And if we run all the code here, we'll now see what we get in our summarized object. So now we have a tibble with 120 rows and 5 columns. So we have columns for the variables used for grouping and columns for the new summary measure outputs. And here we have 1 row for every combination of education and year. Now you might notice we got this warning here that summarize has grouped output by education, and you can override with the groups argument. So this just tells us that this resulting object here is grouped by education. And if we want to have it not grouped at all, we can type .groups equals drop, and then the resulting object will have no groups at all. So if I run this again and I look at summarized, we see that what's happened here is we took our mutated data frame with its 1.3 million rows. We grouped it by education and year, and within education and year, we took 3 summaries of the distribution of incomes, and those summaries are the 10th, 50th, and 90th percentiles. So that's it for group by and summarize.